The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was bigger than most cities. Thousands of alien beings sat in rows that went up so high they disappeared into shadows. The air buzzed with the sound of translator machines working to turn hundreds of different languages into something everyone could understand. Ambassador Hyun-woo walked slowly to the center of the hall. His black diplomatic uniform looked simple compared to the bright colors and strange shapes of the alien delegates around him. He was human, and humans were still new to this council. Most species here had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. Humans had only been doing it for about 50. In the observation area above, So-Young watched her mentor prepare to speak. She was only 28 years old, the youngest human ever to work as a diplomat. Her job was to watch and learn. Today, she had a feeling she would learn more than she wanted to. The problem had started 3 weeks ago on a planet called Kepler 442b. Human miners had been working there, digging up rare metals that were needed for spaceship engines. The Velthari Empire claimed they owned that planet. The humans said they had gotten permission from the local government to mine there. The Velthari did not care about permission from locals. They sent warships to drive the humans away. The human miners fought back. When the shooting stopped, the Velthari mining station was gone, and 2 of their warships were floating in space as burning metal. Now the Velthari wanted revenge. War Prime Kyle stood up from his seat. He was huge, even for a Velthari. His body looked like a mix between a giant insect and a machine. 4 red eyes glowed in his triangular head. His arms ended in claws that could cut through steel. When he spoke, his voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "These humans destroyed our property," Kyle said. His words came out of a small box that translated his language. "They killed our people. The Velthari Empire demands justice. We will hunt them down wherever they run." Murmurs filled the hall. Some aliens nodded in agreement. Others looked worried. A few seemed scared. Elder Tae-min slowly stood up from his place near the front. He was old, even for his species. His green scales had turned gray with age. His long neck moved like a snake as he looked around the room. When he spoke, everyone listened. The Corvan people were known for their wisdom and their long memories. "Young Kale," Tae-min said in a voice like dried leaves, "you speak of things you do not understand. The humans have pulled back beyond the veil. There is a reason for this. There is a reason why we have the old rule." Kyle's 4 eyes focused on the elder. "What rule, old one?" "The Velthari fear no one." Taemin's scales seemed to grow darker. "The oldest rule in the galaxy, the rule that has kept peace for 3,000 years. Do not pursue the humans beyond the neutral zone. Do not follow them into the deep dark." "Why?" Kale demanded. "What can these soft mammals do to the mighty Velthari?" Other voices joined in. The hall became noisy with arguments. Some species supported Kale. They said humans were young and weak. They said the old rules were just superstition. Other species sided with Tae-min. They said the old warnings existed for good reasons. So-Young watched it all with growing fear. She had heard stories, whispers in the diplomatic halls, stories about what happened to species that chased humans too far. But she had always thought they were just stories meant to scare children. Ambassador Hyun-woo raised his hand for silence. The hall slowly became quiet. "The human government regrets the loss of Velthari life," Hyun-woo said in a calm voice. "We are willing to pay compensation for the damage to your station. We are willing to discuss better ways to solve problems like this in the future. Kale made a sound like angry metal. The Velthari do not want your money, human. We want justice. We want blood. Then you will have to come and take it, Hyunwoo replied. His voice was still calm, but So Young heard something else in it, something cold. The hall exploded into noise again. Some aliens shouted support for war, others begged for peace. Through it all, Elder Tae-min sat quietly, his ancient eyes fixed on something no one else could see. The vote took 3 hours. It was close, but Kale had made deals with other warlike species. The Drakmor Collective wanted to test their new weapons. The Scythian Brotherhood thought humans had grown too bold. The vote passed by just 12 voices. The Galactic Council gave the Velthari Empire permission to pursue the humans beyond the neutral zone. As the aliens began to leave the Great Hall, So Young made her way down to meet Hyunwoo. She found him standing alone, looking up at the empty seats. "Sir," she said quietly, "what happens now?" Hyunwoo was quiet for a long moment. "Now we go home, So Young. We send the message. And we hope the Velthari are not as foolish as they seem." "What message?" "Protocol Omega," Hyunwoo said. The words sounded heavy, like they carried a weight So Young could not understand. As they walked toward the exit, Elder Tae-min appeared beside them. The old alien moved so quietly that So Young jumped when she saw him. "Human ambassador," Tae-min said. "I tried to warn them." "I know, Elder. Your people have always been wise friends to humanity." Taemin's long neck curved down so he could look directly at Hyunwoo. "How many ships are sleeping out there?" Hyunwoo met the alien's gaze. "Enough." "And how many species?" "2. "Many." Taemin nodded slowly. "I remember the Catherian Empire. 40 billion souls across 100 worlds. They thought they were gods among the stars. Then they decided humans were a threat that needed to be removed." "What happened to them?" So Young asked, though she was not sure she wanted to know. "Nothing," Taemin replied. "That is the point. Nothing happened to them. They simply stopped. No more messages from their worlds. No more ships in their space. When scouts finally went to look, they found empty planets and cold space stations. As if 40 billion people had just walked away from everything they had built. So Young felt cold. Where did they go? Taemin's old eyes looked sad. "Ask the humans, young one. They are the gardeners now." As they left the council building, So Young looked back at the Great Hall one last time. She wondered if the Velthari would ever sit in those seats again. She wondered if anyone would. Above them, the first Velthari warships were already moving toward the neutral zone. War Prime Kyle was eager to begin his hunt. He had no idea that he was not the hunter in this story. He was the prey. Admiral Dong-hyun stood on the bridge of the human ship Indomitable Spirit. The ship was not large compared to the giant war vessels that other species built. It looked simple, almost plain, but Dong-hyun had learned long ago that looks could lie. The message from the Galactic Council appeared on his screen. He read it twice, then set it down with steady hands. Around him, his crew waited for orders. They had been waiting at the edge of the neutral zone for 3 days, knowing this moment would come. "Sir?" Captain Ji-hai asked. She was young for a ship captain, only 35. But she had been with Dong-hyun for 10 years. She knew that look on his face. It was the look he got when the galaxy was about to learn why humans had been given the dark spaces between the stars. Signal all human vessels, Dong-hyun said quietly. Send them the code. Which code, sir? Omega. Ji-Hai's hand stopped moving toward her control panel. Omega was the code they had hoped never to use. It meant the old agreements were broken. It meant the hunting season was open again. Sir, are you sure? The Velthari Empire has been given permission to pursue us beyond the veil. Elder Taemin tried to warn them, but they would not listen. Dong-hyun looked out at the stars. Send the code, Captain. We are going home. 2 hours away, War Prime Kale stood on the bridge of his flagship Eternal Conquest. The ship was a work of art, covered in spikes and glowing symbols that showed the power of the Velthari Empire. Behind him, 236 other ships waited in perfect formation. Kale felt proud as he looked at his fleet. These were the best ships the Velthari had ever built. Each one carried enough firepower to destroy a city. Each one was crewed by warriors who had never known defeat. War Prime, his sensor officer reported. The human ships are moving. They are heading into the nebula that marks the edge of the veil. Kale's 4 eyes focused on the display screen. He could see the human ships as small dots of light disappearing into the swirling clouds of gas and dust. The nebula looked beautiful from a distance, with colors that shifted like oil on water. How many ships do they have? Kyle asked. 23. War Prime. All of them are small, nothing larger than a light cruiser. Kyle laughed, a sound like breaking glass. 23 ships against our fleet? They must be even more foolish than I thought. Commander Vex, Kale's tactical advisor, stepped forward. Vex was older than most Velthari warriors. He had fought in the Spiral Wars and the Metal Rebellion. He had seen things that had taught him caution. War Prime, Vex said carefully. Perhaps we should think about this more. The old warnings exist for a reason. No species has ever pursued humans beyond the veil and returned to tell what they found. Kyle turned his burning eyes on Vex. Are you afraid, old warrior? Are you scared of mammals that run from a real fight? I am concerned, War Prime. The humans have been in that space for 50 years. We do not know what they have built there. We do not know what they have become. What could they become? Kyle demanded. They are young, they are weak. They have no great weapons, no ancient technology. What could possibly threaten the Velthari Empire? Vex had no answer for that. But deep in his warrior's heart, he felt something he had not felt in many years. Fear. Advance the fleet, Kyle ordered. Follow the humans into their nebula. Show them what happens when they anger the Velthari. The great fleet moved forward like a spear of light piercing the darkness. As they entered the nebula, the colors around them became brighter. The gas clouds swirled in patterns that seemed almost alive. On his ship, Dong-hyun watched the Velthari fleet enter the veil. He felt no anger, no fear, only sadness. Another species was about to learn why humans lived in the dark spaces. Another species was about to become part of the garden. Signal received from Deep Station, reported Lieutenant Min-jae from his position at the communications console. Protocol Omega confirmed. All defense systems are coming online. How long before they reach the first marker? Ji-Hai asked. 6 hours at their current speed, Min-jae replied. Dong-hyun nodded. Signal the sanctuary. Tell them to prepare the Guardians. Deep in space, far from any star, ancient machines began to wake up. They had been sleeping for decades, waiting for the signal that would call them to duty again. Now that signal had come. Dr. Min Ho sat in his office at the Corvin Institute, looking at the data streaming in from deep space monitors. The readings showed the Velthari fleet crossing into the Veil, following the human ships deeper into the nebula. Min Ho was one of the few non-humans who knew some of the truth about what lay beyond the Veil. He had spent his life studying the remains of dead civilizations. He had found the clues that others had missed or chosen to ignore. He reached for his communicator and began sending urgent messages to anyone who would listen. Most would think he was crazy. A few might remember the old stories and understand. "This is Dr. Min Ho at the Corvin Institute," his message began. "The Velthari have crossed into the Veil in pursuit of human vessels. I repeat, they have entered human deep space. All species are advised to begin emergency protocols. The humans are about to wake up." But his warnings came too late. The Velthari were already too deep in the nebula to turn back. Even if Kale had wanted to retreat, which he did not, the swirling gases around them made navigation difficult. The only way forward was to follow the human ships. As the hours passed, the Velthari fleet went deeper into the Veil. The space around them began to feel different. Old, heavy with the weight of things that had happened long ago. Navigator Zen reported strange readings on his instruments. "War Prime. I am seeing debris fields ahead. Large ones." "Debris from what?" Kyle asked. "Unknown, sir. The pieces are too old to identify, but there are a lot of them." Kyle felt his first moment of doubt. But his pride was stronger than his fear. The Velthari Empire had conquered 40 worlds. They had destroyed 3 other spacefaring civilizations. What could these humans have that was more dangerous than the Velthari war machine? He would find out soon enough. The human ships stayed just ahead of them, always visible on sensors but never close enough to catch. It was as if they were leading. The Velthari somewhere specific, somewhere planned. "War Prime," Vex said quietly. "I think we are walking into a trap." Kale's claws clicked against the metal of his command chair. "Let them try to trap us, old friend. Let them try." But deep in his heart, even Kale was beginning to wonder what lay ahead in the darkness. The humans seemed too calm, too sure of themselves. It was not how prey was supposed to act. It was how predators acted when they were leading victims to their feeding ground. The Velthari fleet pressed deeper into the Veil, following the small human ships toward whatever waited in the dark between. The stars. Behind them, the last light of known space faded away. Ahead lay only mystery, and the growing certainty that they had made a terrible mistake. The Velthari fleet had been following the human ships for 3 days when Navigator Zen first noticed something was wrong. His instruments were showing readings that made no sense. Space itself seemed to be bending around them. "War Prime," Zen called out, his voice tight with confusion. "The stars are not where they should be. My navigation systems cannot find any known reference points." Kale looked at the star charts displayed on the main screen. The patterns of light outside their ships looked nothing like the star maps in their computers. It was as if they had traveled much farther than should have been possible. "How can that be?" Kale demanded. "We have only been traveling for 3 days." "I do not know, War Prime. But according to our instruments, we are now hundreds of light years from where we started." Commander Vex studied the readings with growing alarm. "War Prime, I think we have entered some kind of space distortion. The humans may have technology we do not understand." Before Kale could reply, the sensor officer spoke up. "War Prime, I am detecting massive energy signatures ahead. Thousands of them." "Ships?" Kyle asked. I am not sure, sir. The readings are unlike anything in our databases. On the main screen, they could see what lay ahead of them. At first, it looked like an asteroid field. Thousands of dark shapes, floating in space, scattered across an area larger than most solar systems. But as they got closer, the shapes began to look more organized, more purposeful. "Those are not asteroids," Vex whispered. He was right. They were ships, millions of them, from species the Velthari had never seen before. Some were enormous, larger than space stations. Others were sleek and beautiful, made of materials that seemed to glow with their own light. All of them were dead, floating in perfect formation like a vast graveyard. "What happened here?" Zen asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Kyle stared at the massive field of dead ships. Some of the designs looked familiar. He thought he recognized a few Catherian vessels, though the Catherian Empire had vanished from the galaxy decades ago. Other ships belonged to species he had only heard about in old stories. "War Prime," the sensor officer reported. "I am detecting human life signs ahead. The ships we have been following have stopped at the center of the debris field. Admiral Dong Hyun stood in the command center of the sanctuary, humanity's most carefully guarded secret. The facility was built inside a massive asteroid at the heart of the ship graveyard. From the outside, it looked like just another piece of space debris. Inside, it was humanity's greatest achievement and darkest shame." "How many Velthari ships?" Dong Hyun asked. 237 still active," reported Lieutenant Min Jae from his sensor station. "They have maintained formation but reduced speed. I think they are beginning to understand what they are looking at." Colonel Su-jin stood beside the tactical display, studying the formation of alien ships. "Should we send a warning? Give them a chance to leave?" "The warnings were given long ago," Dong Hyun replied. "Elder Taemin spoke for all the wise species in the galaxy. The Velthari chose not to listen." Captain Ji-hai looked up from her station. "Sir, we have movement in the graveyard. The Guardians are beginning to wake up." Deep in the vast field of dead ships, ancient systems that had slumbered for decades began to activate. Power flowed through conduits that had been cold for years. Weapons that had been silent charged up with deadly energy. The first Guardian to fully awaken had once been a Catherian dreadnought called the Star of Heaven. When the Catherian Empire had tried to destroy humanity, they had brought their finest ships and greatest warriors. They had thought themselves gods among the stars. Now their greatest warships served a different master. Human engineers had taken it apart and put it back together with improvements that its original builders could never have imagined. Where smooth, organic curves had once flowed along its hull, angular human modifications jutted out like metal bones. Its weapons were no longer purely Catherian technology. They were something new, something hybrid, something deadlier than anything either species could have built alone. Engineer Eugene worked in the modified bridge of what had once been Guardian 47. The ship had been a Zeloth battlecruiser before the Zeloth Confederacy had decided that humans were a disease that needed to be cut out of the galaxy. Like all the others, they had followed human ships into the deep dark. Like all the others, they had never returned home. "Guardian 47 coming online," Eugene reported to the sanctuary. "All systems green, weapons charged and ready." Similar reports came in from across the graveyard. Guardian after Guardian awakened from their long sleep, each one a hybrid of alien technology and human engineering. Each one a monument to the price of hunting humanity. On his flagship, Kyle watched in growing horror as lights began to appear throughout the ship graveyard. The dead vessels were coming to life, one by one, until the space around them glowed with the energy of hundreds of active warships. "What are those things?" Vex stammered. "They are Guardians," came a voice over the communication channel. The voice belonged to Admiral Dong-hyun, though Kale did not know that yet. They are what remains of every species that thought they could hunt humanity to extinction. Kale found his voice. "Who are you? What do you want?" "I am Admiral Dong-hyun of the Human Defense Fleet, and I want you to understand something very important, War Prime Kale. You are not the first to come here with hatred in your hearts. You are not the first to believe that humans are weak prey that can be hunted down and destroyed." The channel crackled with interference as more Guardians came online. In the background, Kyle could hear other voices speaking in languages he did not recognize. "The Catherian Empire believed they were gods," Dong-hyun continued. "They brought 40 billion souls and 1,000 warships to cleanse humanity from the galaxy. Their flagship, the Star of Heaven, was supposed to be unsinkable." On cue, the massive Guardian that had once been the Star of Heaven moved into view. Its hull was scarred with battle damage that had never been repaired, marked with symbols from a dozen different species. It moved with the same grace it had possessed as a Catherian ship, but there was something different about it now, something predatory. "The Zealoth Confederacy thought they could crush us with pure numbers," Dong-hyun said. "They sent 5,000 ships to burn every human world. The Infinite Empire believed their technology made them invincible. The Void Hunters thought their stealth ships could strike us down before we could fight back." More Guardians moved into formation around the Velthari fleet. Each one was different, built from the remains of a different species. Each one told the story of another civilization that had underestimated humanity. "What happened to them?" Kyle asked, though he was beginning to understand. "They became part of the garden," Dong-hyun replied. "Every species that comes here with the intention of destroying humanity becomes part of our defense. Their ships, their technology, their knowledge. We take it all and make it better." Captain Seok-jin stood in the command center of the greatest Guardian of all. The Leviathan had once been the pride of the Infinite Empire, a ship so advanced that its builders thought it could destroy stars. Now it bore human modifications that made it something beyond classification, beyond understanding. "The Leviathan is fully operational," Seok-jin reported. "All exotic weapons online. Reality distortion field ready." The massive ship moved through the graveyard like a whale swimming through an ocean of metal. When it reached the edge of the Velthari formation, it simply stopped and waited. Kale looked at his tactical display. His magnificent fleet was surrounded by hundreds of Guardian ships, each one a hybrid nightmare of alien technology and human engineering, and behind them all lurked the Leviathan, so large that his sensors could not even measure it properly. "You can still leave," Dong-hyun said over the communication channel. "Take your ships and go back to the galaxy. Tell them what you have seen here. Remind them why the old rule exists." For a moment, Kyle almost considered it, but the pride of the Velthari Empire burned too bright in his chest. He had come here to destroy the humans. He would not return home in failure. "The Velthari Empire does not retreat," Kyle announced. "We came here to hunt. We will finish what we started." The communication channel went quiet for a long moment. Then Admiral Dong-hyun spoke again, and his voice was filled with sadness. "Then you will become part of the garden, too." The battle began without warning. One moment, The Velthari fleet was surrounded by silent Guardian ships. The next moment, space itself seemed to explode with energy. The Guardians moved like they were dancing to music only they could hear. Each ship knew exactly where the others would be, what targets they would take, when they would fire. It was not like watching separate vessels fight. It was like watching parts of a single giant creature work together. War Prime Kale had seen many battles in his long life as a warrior. He had commanded fleets against rebels and pirates. He had led the assault on the Drakmor colonies. But he had never seen anything like this. "Return fire!" he shouted over the noise of alarms. "All ships, attack pattern 7. The Velthari tried to fight back. Their plasma cannons fired bright beams of energy toward the Guardians. Their missile launchers sent clouds of explosive death racing through space. For a few seconds, Kale thought they might have a chance. Then, the Guardian weapons fired back. The beam that came from the ship that had once been the Star of Heaven was beautiful and terrible at the same time. It was not just a weapon. It was art. The energy twisted and danced as it crossed space, changing colors like a rainbow made of pure destruction. When it hit the Velthari cruiser Blade of Victory, the ship simply came apart, not exploded, not melted. It came apart like someone had carefully taken all the pieces and scattered them across space. "Impossible," Commander Vex whispered. "No weapon can do that." But more beams were already firing. Each Guardian ship seemed to have weapons that worked in different ways. Some fired energy that burned through armor like it was paper. Others launched strange missiles that seemed to think for themselves, dodging defensive fire and striking, exactly where they would do the most damage. Admiral Dong-hyun watched the battle from the sanctuary with cold eyes. He felt no joy in what was happening. No anger. Only the tired sadness of someone who had seen this same story play out too many times. Guardian Wing 7 reports 12 Velthari cruisers destroyed, Captain Ji-hai announced from her station. Guardian Wing 3 has disabled the enemy flagship's engines. Casualties on our side? Dong-hyun asked. None, sir. The Guardians are operating at 97% efficiency. Dong-hyun nodded. The Guardians had been designed for this. Each one was built from the wreckage of ships that had tried to destroy humanity. Each one carried weapons and technology that humanity had taken from their enemies and made better. Engineer Yu Jin worked frantically at her station aboard Guardian 47. The ship that had once been a proud Zeloth battle cruiser now served a different purpose. Its original weapons had been good. The human modifications had made them perfect. Target acquired, she reported to the other Guardians. Velthari heavy cruiser, range 4,000 kilometers. The fusion lance that fired from Guardian 47 was a hybrid of human plasma technology and Zeloth exotic matter manipulation. The original Zeloth builders had thought their weapons were the best in the galaxy. They had been wrong. The humans had made them better. The beam carved through the Velthari formation like a sword-cutting paper. 3 ships died in the first second. 2 more were crippled and began spinning helplessly through space. But the Guardians were just getting started. Captain Seok Jin stood in the command center of the Leviathan, watching the tactical display with calm eyes. The great ship had not fired yet. It was waiting, watching, letting the smaller Guardians do their work. "Sir," his weapons officer reported, "the Velthari are trying to retreat. Should we let them go?" Seok Jin looked at the display. About half of the Velthari fleet was still functional, though most of those ships were damaged. They were trying to pull back, to escape from the nightmare they had stumbled into. "No," Seok Jin said quietly. Admiral Dong-hyun was clear. Some must survive to carry the message, but not many. The Leviathan began to move. When it did, space itself seemed to bend around it. The ship was so large that it had its own gravity field, so advanced that it could manipulate the fabric of reality itself. The reality distortion cannon charged with a sound like the universe screaming. When it fired, the beam did not just destroy the Velthari ships in its path. It erased them. Not destroyed, not vaporized. Erased, as if they had never existed at all. 10. Velthari ships simply stopped being there. War Prime. Kale stared at his tactical display in horror. Of his magnificent fleet of 237 ships, only 43 were still capable of fighting. The rest were either destroyed or floating dead in space. The humans had done this in less than 6 hours. War Prime, Vex said in a broken voice. We have to surrender. We have to stop this. Kyle looked around his bridge. Half of his officers were dead. The other half were staring at their instruments like they could not believe what they were seeing. His beautiful flagship was a wreck. Only emergency power kept them alive. For the first time in Velthari history, a War Prime was about to surrender. This is War Prime Kale of the Velthari Empire, he said into his communicator. We yield. We surrender. The weapons fire stopped immediately. The Guardians held their positions, but did not fire again. In the sudden silence, Kale could hear his own hearts beating too fast. War Prime Kyle, came Admiral Dong-hyun's voice over the communication channel. You have seen what lies beyond the veil. You have seen the price of hunting humanity. Are you ready to listen now? Yes, Kyle whispered. Yes, we are ready to listen. Good. You will be allowed to return to your empire with some of your ships. You will carry a message to the galaxy. You will tell them what you have seen here. The main screen in Kale's bridge lit up with images from across the graveyard. Millions of dead ships from dozens of different species, all of them converted, modified, turned into weapons that served humanity. Every species you see here thought, they could destroy us, Dong-hyun explained. The Kytherian Empire brought 40 billion souls. The Zeloth Confederacy sent 5,000 warships. The Infinite Empire used weapons that could crack planets in half. All of them are here now. All of them are part of the garden. Dr. Yoon Seo appeared on the screen, standing in what looked like a vast museum. Behind her, Kale could see displays showing the history of each dead civilization, their art, their culture, their science, all preserved, all remembered. We do not take pleasure in this, Dr. Yoon Seo said. Every species that comes here teaches us something new. Their technology makes us stronger. Their knowledge makes us wiser. But we would rather they had stayed home. Why? Kyle asked. Why do you do this? Because if we do not, Admiral Dong-hyun replied, the galaxy will never leave us in peace. Every generation, some new species decides that humanity is weak, that we are prey to be hunted. So we teach them the same lesson we have taught all the others. The images on the screen changed, showing the Guardians in all their terrible beauty. Ships from 100 different cultures, all working together, all serving the same purpose. The old rule exists for a reason, War Prime. Do not pursue the humans. We did not make that rule to protect ourselves from you. We made it to protect you from us. Captain Seok-jin's voice came over the channel. 43 Velthari ships will be allowed to leave. The rest will join the garden. Their crews will be taken to processing stations where they will be given a choice. They can join us willingly, or they can be converted like their ships." "Converted?" Kale asked, though he was afraid of the answer. "Humanity learns from everyone who comes here," Dr. Yunseo explained. "We learn their languages, their customs, their ways of thinking. Some choose to become human. Others choose to serve in different ways. But everyone who enters the Veil becomes part of humanity's defense." The communication channel went quiet for a moment. Then Admiral Dong Hyun spoke one last time. "Go home, War Prime Kyle. Tell your people what you have seen. Tell the galaxy that the old rule still stands, and pray that no one else is foolish enough to test it again." As the surviving Velthari ships began their long journey home, Kale looked back at the graveyard one last time. The Guardians were already returning to their silent watch, waiting for the next species that would think itself strong enough to hunt humanity. Kale now understood why no one talked about what happened to those who pursued humans beyond the Veil. There were never enough survivors to tell the story. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the largest anyone could remember. Every species sent their highest leaders. Even the mysterious void dancers, who rarely left their home dimension, sent a representative. The Great Hall was so crowded that extra viewing areas had to be opened. Ambassador Hyun Woo walked into the center of the hall with slow, measured steps. Behind him came Admiral Dong Hyun, still wearing his military uniform with its simple decorations. Beside them walked Dr. Yunseo, carrying a datapad that contained information the galaxy was not ready to hear. For the first time in 3,000 years, humans walked among the other species as equals, not as the young newcomers who had been given the dark spaces out of pity, not as the refugees who had been allowed to hide beyond the Veil. As equals, the silence in the hall was complete. Every being present knew what had happened to the Velthari fleet. The survivors had returned with a story that made no sense. Ships made from the dead, weapons that could erase matter from existence, technology that bent space and time. Most had thought the Velthari were lying. Some had thought they were broken by defeat, but the recordings they brought back told a different story. Elder Tae-min spoke first, his ancient voice carrying across the vast hall. 3 days ago, the Velthari Empire sent 237 warships beyond the Veil to hunt human vessels. 43 ships returned. War Prime Kyle has asked to address the council. Kyle walked slowly to the speaker's area. The proud warrior who had demanded the right to hunt humans was gone. In his place stood someone who had seen too much, learned too much, understood too much. "I came here to tell you about monsters," Kale said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I came to warn you about the things that live in the dark between the stars." He activated a holographic display that filled the center of the hall. The images showed the graveyard in all its terrible glory. Millions of dead ships floating in perfect formation. Ancient vessels from civilizations that most species had forgotten. "This is what we found beyond the Veil," Kale continued. "Every species that ever tried to destroy humanity. Every fleet that thought itself invincible. They are all there, converted, into guardians that serve the humans." Murmurs filled the hall. Some delegates looked skeptical. Others seemed frightened. A few were already making plans to leave. The recording continued, showing the battle from the perspective of Kyle's flagship. The Guardians moving like a single organism. Weapons that defied understanding. Ships that should have been myths fighting. With technology that seemed like magic. "How many species?" asked Counselor Dalsu of the Harmony Collective. His people were pacifists who had never fought a war, but even they understood the implications of what they were seeing. 47 confirmed civilizations, Dr. Yunseo replied, consulting her datapad. Some of them were galaxy-spanning empires. Others were single-world species that thought their technology made them superior. All of them made the same mistake. What mistake? Dalsu asked, though he was afraid of the answer. Ambassador Hyunwoo stepped forward. They believed that humanity could be hunted to extinction. They believed that we were weak because we chose to live in the dark spaces. They believed that running away meant we were afraid. Admiral Dong Hyun activated another display. This one showed the true extent of human space, not the small territory that appeared on galactic maps, but the reality. Vast regions that other species thought were empty, dead zones that were supposedly uninhabitable, nebulas and asteroid fields that ships avoided because they were too dangerous. We have been living in those spaces for 50 years, Dong Hyun said. Every place you think is empty, every region you think is too dangerous to explore. We are there. We have been there all along. The display zoomed in on specific regions. What looked like empty space was revealed to be full of human installations, bases built inside asteroids, cities hidden in nebulas, factories that turned the wreckage of dead civilizations into something new. You gave us the dark spaces because you thought they were worthless, Hyunwoo continued. But we are creatures of adaptation. We took those worthless places and made them into something else. We became gardeners of a very special kind of garden. Counselor Baekhan of the trade. Federation raised his hand. His species controlled most of the commercial shipping in the galaxy. They had always thought of humans as customers, not threats. What do you want from us? Baekhan asked. What are your demands? The same thing we have always wanted, Hyunwoo replied. To be left alone. The old rule stands. Do not pursue the humans beyond the neutral zone. Do not follow us into the deep dark. Do not test our patience. And if we do? Asked General Rathmore of the Scythian Brotherhood. His people were warriors who respected only strength. Dr. Yunseo looked directly at the general. Then you will become part of the garden. Your ships will join the Guardians. Your technology will be studied and improved. Your knowledge will become our knowledge, and your people will have a choice. Become human, or serve humanity in other ways. That is slavery, protested Counselor Valeth of the Freedom Alliance. No, Admiral Dong Hyun said quietly. Slavery is when someone takes your freedom by force. We offer a choice. Those who join us willingly are treated as equals. Those who refuse are given other work. But everyone who enters the Veil becomes part of humanity's defense. The hall erupted into arguments. Some species demanded action against the humans. Others called for immediate peace negotiations. A few were already planning to evacuate their border worlds. Through it all, the human delegation stood quietly in the center of the chaos. They had said what they came to say. Now it was up to the galaxy to decide what to do with that information. Elder Taemin raised his hand for silence. The old Corvin's voice cut through the noise like a blade. I have a question for the humans, Taemin said. How many more graveyards are there? How many more gardens do you tend? The human delegation exchanged glances. Finally, Admiral Dong Hyun answered. Enough. Enough for what? Enough to make sure that no species in this galaxy will ever again try to commit genocide against humanity. Enough to make sure that the old rule is never forgotten again. The session ended in stunned silence. As the delegates filed out, many of them were already sending urgent messages to their homeworlds. The balance of power in the galaxy had just shifted, and everyone needed to figure out what that meant. Ambassador So Young, now older and wiser than when she had first watched the Velthari demand their right to hunt humans, approached her former mentor. "Sir," she said to Hyunwoo, "do you think they understand now?" "Some of them do," Hyunwoo replied. "Others will need more time to accept the new reality. And a few—" He looked around the emptying hall. "A few will test us again. They always do. And when they do, then the garden will grow larger. Years later, Captain So Young would take her first command beyond the veil. As her ship passed through the graveyard, she looked upon the Guardians with new eyes. She understood now that they were not just weapons. They were teachers. Lessons written in metal and energy that reminded the galaxy why some rules should never be broken. In the deepest parts of human space, where light itself feared to travel, the ancient machines continued their eternal watch. They waited in the darkness between the stars, ready to wake when called, ready to teach the same lesson they had taught so many times before. The old rule endured, now carved in the memory of every species that sailed the stars. Do not pursue the humans. They remember everything. They forget nothing, and they never forgive twice. The galaxy had learned this lesson at great cost. Some species chose to ignore it. Their ships joined the garden, their people joined humanity, and their names were added to the long list of civilizations that had underestimated the creatures who lived in the dark. But for those who listened, for those who remembered, there was peace. The humans asked for nothing more than to be left alone in their vast territories. They traded fairly, honored their agreements, and kept their promises, as long as no one followed them home, as long as no one broke the oldest rule in the galaxy, as long as no one disturbed the gardeners who tended the lessons of the past, waiting patiently to teach them again to anyone foolish enough to believe that humanity could be hunted to extinction. The dark spaces between the stars were no longer empty. They were home to something that had learned to adapt, to survive, to thrive in places where other species could not even exist. And in that darkness, humanity waited and watched, hoping they would never again need to add new ships to their collection. But ready if they must, the old rule stood eternal: do not pursue the humans. The galaxy had learned why.